Hey, Jim Malone here from njhypno.com, and welcome to this video. It's called 5 Healthy Weight Strategies They Didn't Tell You About. And I'm not sure who they are, but these are just less than well known ideas that may help you to get to the place where you want to be as far as your physical condition. And a little bit about myself: I've been a professional hypnotist since 1995. One of the most popular sessions people come into, somebody like myself, is for weight loss. And it's understandable because I think in recent years they've figured out that like 2/3 of US adults are overweight and obese, and those numbers are climbing in kids as well. And it can be a very challenging thing to work with. I have to get myself back on track from time to time with that, and in large part because there's been a lot of changes in the way we move and the way we eat and so on. Now, I used to run a lot of weight loss group programs at different venues. I don't do that anymore. And when we would do the program, the first part would be an explanation of what hypnosis involves, but most of it was really about some tips that you could use to get yourself on track. Now, the hypnosis part of the session, we use a deeply relaxed state of mind and body to get the subconscious mind, the habit part of the mind, more open to redirection and suggestion. Because you see, the subconscious mind is emotional and imaginative, and the techniques of hypnosis really do a great job of engaging that part of yourself. With that said, it is possible also to create lasting habit change simply by intentionally repeating certain behaviors on a consistent basis. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you here. We're not going to do the hypnosis session here online, but rather instead some things you could start doing right now that could be of great benefit to you. Now, two mind shifts that I always like to bring up before we get to the actual tips or the strategies. The two mind shifts I'd like you to consider is: the first one is to really look at your goal. We often say it's weight loss, and that becomes an obsession on the scale, but are you really looking for fat loss? And there is a significant difference because I'm going to give you an example. In recent years, they came up with the body mass index. A lot of health coaches, myself included, are not particularly thrilled with that, but it's where you plug in your height and your weight and it gives you this number. A lot of people just seem to like numbers. But it doesn't give you any idea about the lean to fat ratio in your body. And if we made like up an example, we got two young men, maybe they're 20 years old, and they're both 5'10" and 240 pounds. And the first one is a couch potato who's kind of lazy, he eats poorly, and he's classified as obese, and this young man's really in not good condition. But across town, that other kid is the running back for his college football team, and he has like 5% body fat and can run and lift and so on. He is also classified as obese under that system when clearly he's not. So I would encourage you to expand your vision a little bit and look at: do you want to be more muscular? Do you want to be more athletic? That's a really good goal. Do you want to just have more energy and strength? Not saying that there's no value to weighing yourself, but I don't think it should be your primary focus. The next one is dieting versus lifestyle change. And there was a book I read a few years back by the founder of, that was a psychiatrist actually, who invented the heavy hands method. It's where you walk with light weights. And actually, it's a great form of exercise. And this psychiatrist, Leonard Schwartz, wrote it because he got to middle age. He was in terrible physical shape. And in one of his books I was reading, it was kind of interesting. I even made a point of writing it down, where he said the problem with diets is that there's always this imaginary endpoint where you put up with the inconvenience being controlled by the plan, so on and so forth. Just a lot of miserable stuff. Then you're going to get to this place where you can go back and do whatever you want. And clearly that experience shows us that does not work. So he was a big proponent of, these long-term changes in your behavior, and he was a big proponent of exercise. Okay, so with those out of the way, just looking at your body composition is really what you want to change, and lifestyle changes. What are the strategies? Well, number one is that they've noticed that a key difference between people who struggle with their weight versus those who manage it naturally is the people who struggle with their weight tend to make the decision to eat impulsively. They'll see a tray of donuts and they'll go, "Ooh, that looks good." They shovel them in, and then they feel terrible usually afterwards, and sometimes they're ashamed, but actually physically feel ill. The people who gravitate towards maintaining a healthier weight naturally will see that same tray of donuts and go, "How would I feel later if I were to eat that?" And the thing is you'd feel terrible. So what they'll often do is, "Oh, I'll have a little taste," or, "I'm going to pass on that." And so it's changing that decision criteria. And it's really about learning to listen to your body more rather than how many points or calories, this, that, and so on. Over time, you will develop that ability to listen to your body and give it the nutrition it needs. And it can be helpful to write that one down. How would I feel if I were to eat this? How will I feel later? And just put it somewhere in your bedroom or your bathroom mirror or on your desk. And eventually that'll become habitual. While you're taking that mindful pause, it's also very helpful to check in and see if you're having what we call a blast. And this blast necessarily isn't so fun. BLAST is an acronym for, are you bored, lonely, angry, stressed, or tired? And those negative emotional states are not cured by eating. So, okay, that's number one. Number two, that I've seen this one work for a lot of people, if they're willing to do it, is to assign an eating zone in your home. Sometimes it can be in the office, but it seems to be mostly at home. People say, I've heard this countless times, "I do really good during the day, and then the wheels fall off the bus at night." So the person has a normal breakfast, lunch, main meal around, say, 6 o'clock. Then they plop down in front of the TV around 7 and just snack until bedtime. And there's like that fourth meal, which can really pack on the pounds. The question arises, though, are you really hungry at those times? And chances are the answer is no. It's just that your brain has learned to make an association between the TV being on and eating. And if you ever had a basic psychology course, there was Pavlov about 100 years ago, the Russian scientist who would, ring the bell, feed his dogs, ring the bell, feed the dogs. Eventually they learned to salivate at the sound of ringing a bell. There was a new connection formed there. We do that as people too. So the strategy is you have that eating zone. It's usually going to be your kitchen table. And let's say you I really want some potato chips. Well, first you're going to ask yourself, how will I feel later if I eat these? But let's say you decide to indulge. Would you have it if you had to sit down at the dining room table? You might, but it would probably cut down on your snacking a great deal. So that's number two, assigning that eating zone. Number three has to do with procrastination towards exercise. And that's the lack of natural movement in our lives has a lot to do with the collective weight gain in our society. I'm old enough to remember as a kid, older folks love to tell these stories of misery, and it wasn't really misery, but when you were watching TV, A, there wasn't that much on, and B, when you wanted to change the channel or adjust the volume, you had to get up and actually turn a dial on the front. Now it's... And then there was something I read that was kind of interesting. It was, if you ever had any familiarity with the old school typewriters, this was before we had computers and word processors, that when you got to the end of the line, there was this thing called the carriage, and you had to slam it, and it would take it back to the left so you could type the next line. Then they came out with electric typewriters that did that for you, and it had this thing called a wraparound feature. And there was some time and movement guy, I read about this. I thought this was fascinating. He figured out that the average secretary would put on about 3 pounds a year because she, I'm not being sexist, but back then most secretaries were women, wouldn't have to keep doing that motion all day. Just that, dropping that off would lead to weight gain over time. So what do you do? I think we have to get into intentional daily movement habits. We kind of have to plan it out. But what happens is sometimes people say it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too late, it's too early, so on, and you make an excuse. But I'll do twice as much tomorrow, and you usually don't, right? So when you catch yourself making an excuse, the technique is that you shrink your goal down to something you can't fail at. Like, I'm going to walk to the end of the driveway, smack the mailbox, and come back, or I'm going to do one push up against the wall. And you're going, oh, what's that going to do? Not much in itself, but you're breaking past the habit of procrastination. And second, almost invariably, you'll do a bit more. And we're getting that ball rolling, that momentum. So that's number 3, the goal reduction technique. Number 4 is, when we were talking about blast earlier, the stressed and the tired. Well, how many of us are walking around wired and tired most of the time? There's a problem with that. You can get your hormones all out of skew. And people who study this tell us this when you're stressed and tired. That leads to weight gain. And the other one is we tend to be more impulsive when we're tired. So, for example, and going back a little bit in time, there was back in the 80s and 90s, the infomercials. And at first people thought it was crazy. Why are you going to pay, although I think it was cheaper to run them late at night, but like at 2 in the morning, they'd have this hour-long program for a product. Well, it's because people were tired and their judgment was not so great at 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So one of my recommendations for you is to consider the idea of just getting more sleep. Going to bed a bit earlier can actually help with your weight loss, your fat loss goals. And it reminds me of a story I heard about a guy who sponsored people in AA. He'd been through the 12 steps, and he was a sponsor. And people would call him up sometimes in the middle of the night. Oh, well, I really am tempted to take a drink. What should I do? And it sounds funny, but he'd say, do you ever drink in your sleep? And they go, no. And he go, well, go to bed and we'll talk tomorrow. So consider getting a bit more sleep if fat loss is, one of your goals. And then the 5th one is to have some sort of strategy in place for when you have a lapse, when you make a mistake. Another key difference they found between people who maintain their weight naturally and those who struggle is the people who struggle tend to have black or white thinking. I have to be perfect on this diet, and if I make one mistake, it means it's all over and I should just give up. And could be comparable to like you were washing your dishes by hand and one fell and broke, and you go, oh, well, I broke that one. Let me take the rest of them and start throwing them against the wall. That would seem crazy, right? But people do that when they're trying to get back in shape, where they make a mistake and they go, oh, this just proves I can't do it. And that means you made a mistake then. Don't keep multiplying it. So having some sort of strategy in place and making an agreement with yourself that when you make a mistake, it just makes you more determined to succeed. So I hope you found these 5 tips helpful. Any one or more of them you want to use. Like I said, I'm a big proponent of writing it down somewhere where you'll see it as a conscious reminder. Now, if you were curious about learning to work with me one-to-one with hypnosis, there's a link down below where you can set up either a telephone or a Zoom consultation. And there's no obligation to this, but it's where we'd spend anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes together and see if my services would be a good fit for you. So I want to thank you for watching. It would help me if you hit the like and subscribe button. Obviously, that would be appreciated. Feel free to share this with anybody else who might benefit. But most importantly, have a great day, and I hope to hear from you soon. Take care.